agus fáilte gach aine. I'm Dr. Miriam Nihan-Gray, and I'm the Associate Director of Glucksman Ireland House, which is, for those of you who don't know, New York University's Centre for the Study of Ireland and the Irish Diaspora. I have the great pleasure also of serving as the Associate Editor of this exciting new series that we're here to celebrate today, the Glucksman Irish Diaspora series. We are really thrilled to mark this development for New York University, and we're really grateful that so many of you have taken your time out of your day to be here with us. We wish that this was an in-person gathering, but that will follow when things allow. Our speakers today include the Consul General for New York, Goran Madden, our co-founder, Loretta Brennan Glucksman, who is also the chair of our advisory board, our wonderful editor at New York University Press, Clara Platter, the editor of the series, our own director, Director of Glucksman Ireland House, Professor Kevin Kenny, and our former interim director and renowned immigration scholar herself and great friend of the house, Professor Hasia Diner. Last but not least, we're really thrilled to have two of the first two authors in this series with us today. Francis Carroll is here all the way from Manitoba, and Cian McMahon is online from Las Vegas, Nevada. So we're covering all geographic angles today. Some of you may be tuning in from Ireland because it's early enough in the day there too. We will run for approximately 1 hour. After the guests speak, we will open up for some discussion. So please feel free to post questions in the Q&A function of this webinar. We are recording the event, as you can see, and we will air it on This Irish American Life on Saturday morning on WNYE 91.5 FM. We'll also upload the event on our YouTube channel if you want to share it or look back on it later. We'll also make sure to share the link to the website if anyone is interested in purchasing a copy of America and the Making of Independent Ireland by Francis and the Coffin Ship. So that is available, and the Coffin Ship's publication is due, I think, maybe early June, so it's available for pre-order now. 1916 is an important year in Irish history, as most people on this webinar would know today. But 1916 is also an important year in the history of NYU, as this is the year that NYU Press was founded by the then Chancellor of the University, Elmer Ellsworth Brown. The press was, in his words, created to publish contributions to higher learning by eminent scholars. In the intervening century, NYU Press has established itself as a preeminent academic press in the United States and beyond. A decade ago, the Huffington Post selected NYU Press as one of the most consistently innovative presses, determined to be, quote, ahead of the cultural curve, publishing literary trends rather than behind it, and, quote again, embodying a willingness to explore the outermost bounds of American literary culture with each new venture. With that spirit in mind, we are thrilled to formalise the study of Ireland and the Irish diaspora through the Glucksman Irish Diaspora series, and to solidify an existing relationship that we have between Glucksman Ireland House and the press. Now I will call on the Consul General of Ireland for New York, Mr. Goran Madden, to say a few words. And as I hand over to him virtually, let me publicly thank you again, Goran, for your continued support for all that we do in these intellectual endeavours. Goran, fáilte, and I hand over to you now.
Thank you, Miriam. Dr. Nihan-Gray. And I'm delighted to join for today's launch, the launch of the Glucksman Diaspora series. Some virtual events are necessary if weak impressions of the real thing, of what we do in normal times, and others over the last 14 months have been necessary, but maybe not desirable, where we keep the plates spinning, we keep the contacts alive through outreach. We all do a bit of that. On top of this, we all know Glucksman Ireland House throws a great party. But today is neither an event just to keep the contacts alive nor a party. It really is about the core business of Glucksman Ireland House, going back to basics, the interdisciplinary study of Ireland, Irish America and the diaspora. It's about first-rate scholarship and making that first-rate scholarship available and accessible to all. So congratulations, Glucksman Ireland House, on the launch. And the idea of making first-rate scholarship available, that's exactly what they and NYU Press have done with Francis Carroll's book, America and the Making of an Independent Ireland. It has been written elsewhere that Ireland is unusual in that we had a foreign service and a foreign policy before we actually had a state. I don't think we're unique, but certainly unusual. And just reading Francis Carroll's book as a diplomat, I love how he has tracked this diplomatic thread from the informality of work within and by Irish American organizations through the pre-state diplomacy to get recognition for the state, and then into the early days of actual state diplomacy as we know it these days. And reading about the build-up to Secretary of State Kellogg's visit to Ireland in 1928, so much of it is recognizable to me nearly 100 years ago. It's familiar to me, the language used, the planning of the event, the pomp and ceremony and the intentional pomp and ceremony of the welcome and the satisfaction with the job well done. But alongside that, the internal familiarity, what is also really familiar to me is the assessment in advance of the visit, making the case for the visit by the US representative in Dublin at the time. And in Professor Carroll's book, he writes that the quotes from the US representative saying, "It would be a great thing for this country if you could come, as it has so long been considered a land of unrest and trouble. And a visit from an American Secretary of State will be a recognition of its stability." Now, for me, and I think for a lot of people on this call who've been following these issues for a long time, it doesn't require a huge leap of the mind to imagine similar notes being passed to the White House in the 1990s about Northern Ireland by the State Department and the National Security Council. So I suppose what Professor Carroll has captured nearly 100 years ago is still relevant today, and it's relevant going forward. All that said, I hope that we've gotten beyond what he also recorded about the New York Times reporting of that visit, where they wrote about Kellogg's visit to Ireland. "Ireland delighted over Kellogg's visit, overjoyed at tribute to Free State, especially as he did not stop in London." We might feel it, but we'd no longer say it. I haven't had a chance yet to read Dr. Cian McMahon's book. I don't think I could physically lay my hands on it, but reading even the advanced publicity for it, when you see the advanced praise, the advanced testimonials from diverse sources such as Cormac O'Grada, Marcus Rediker, and Peter Quinn, I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into it. And also the idea that in the advanced publicity of the social networks created by the immigrants, not just before they left Ireland or when they got here, but on the journey. So I really look forward to getting my hands on it and my teeth into it. I suppose two final comments. All ethnic communities can be a bit solipsistic. As an Irishman, I'll say, well, the Irish built New York, but I will certainly quickly feel the stares and glares of, the Italian and Jewish and Polish and African American and Puerto Rican and other communities saying, well, what about us? And they'd be right. But it is safe to say that we the Irish have made a disproportionate and stunning contribution to this city and to this country, as has the US to Ireland. But it's important to underline at all times that we are just one part of this great community of communities. And I think the fact that the series is published by NYU Press, with all the status that brings to it, as Miriam Nihan-Gray mentioned, elevates those stories and brings them into that wider context and makes sure that we are seen. We love those stories, we celebrate those stories, we want to understand them, but it puts them in, it situates them in that wider context, as does the work of Professor Hazia Diner, who has studied so many of the intersections of these communities. And I should say that the series editor, Professor Kevin Kenny, also elevates them in this way, because as some of you will know, most of you may not, is that Professor Kenny was recently elected the president of the Immigrant and Ethnic History Society of the United States, which is a an honor, an earned and deserved honor. So congratulations, Kevin, and congratulations, Glucksman Ireland House, that your director was so elected. So lastly, and speaking of honors, it's now mine to introduce the next speaker, without whom there will be no Ireland House. There will be no Diaspora series. There would be a Kevin Kenny and a Cian McMahon and a Francis Carroll, but we would not be bonded together in this way. Some of you may have attended, but I know some of you have attended the last in-person Glucksman Ireland House Gala at the end of February last year, before we were all locked down. And at that event, Colm Tobin spoke brilliantly and funnily about the range of disciplines and research that must come together to enable a proper understanding of Seamus Heaney's poetry. That was the hook on which he hung it. But then he also underlined that those disciplines and that excellence is brought together under one roof in Glucksman Ireland House. And that isn't an accident. The tone for the pursuit of excellence in this interdisciplinary study of Ireland and Ireland in America and Irish America, carried forward now by Professor Kenny and Dr. Nihan Gray and many others, was set at the foundation of Ireland House by its founder, Loretta Brennan Glucksman. So delighted to hand over to Loretta. Thank you.
Wow. Ooh, that's the proverbial hard act to follow. Thank you, Consul General. Thank you, Goran, or Kiddo, as I often call him. This is not a calm academic day for me, as it should be for you brilliant scholars. This is like 49 Christmas Eves rolled together, and you come down the stairs and there is the dreamed for, longed for present available to you at last. Lou was so intent on having publishing out of Glucksman Ireland House. Joe Lee, our fabulous former academic director, used to say that Lou was a man of the bourse, the boat, and the book. All three of those pillars were uniquely necessary in making the complicated man that he was. I would say that the first one perhaps allowed the other two, but the last one was supernova overall. Lou had deep respect for the book and its power through generations. And to have this series now a reality is just a dream come true. I can't thank Kevin and Miriam enough for their yeoman duty in running the house, running the public program, running everything they do, running their classes, and in their spare time, pulling this magnificent accomplishment together. So also I want to thank the wonderful people at New York University Press. For years and years, we were the scalawag on the block, and we just didn't have the gravity or the gravitas that the press rightfully required. But Clara Platter has worked so beautifully with Kevin and with Miriam and with our beautiful respected authors. So thank you, Clara, and boy, are we going to have a party when we are allowed back in our precious house. And all the people, Joe Lee, Bob Scally, all our wonderful heroes on whose shoulders we stand. Hasia Diner, without whom we wouldn't have reached this point, because without Hasia, we would not have found Kevin Kenny. So Hasia, you always have deep sense of gratitude and a shiny red carpet at Glucksman Ireland House. So I don't really have anything more cogent to say, not that the rest has been cogent, but thank you, Francis. Thank you, Cian, for making this very beautiful foundation on which the generations after you will stand so proudly. I can't say much more or I'll get even blubblier. So thank you all. God bless. Now, it's my privilege to segue into the editor of New York Press that I just mentioned, Clara. And you have been so kind and helpful to us, and this is the result. And as I said, there'll be many more chances for us to thank you in our inimitable Glucksman Ireland House fashion. So Clara Platter of NYU Press.
Thank you. What a beautiful introduction. I'm so grateful to you for your kindness. Yes, I'm Clara Platter. I publish in history and law at NYU Press. You know, we are a boutique, small scholarly publisher. We specialize in the social science and the humanities. We publish books for a wide variety of audiences, from scholars to academics, students, and a general public as well. But really the core of our mission are books that make a significant scholarly contribution, that move a field one book at a time to a more sophisticated and sensitive understanding of our world. And that is certainly my goal with the history list at NYU. And that's why this opportunity to partner with Glucksman Ireland House and to publish in the series is such a significant opportunity for us. And we are extraordinarily grateful to have this partnership, not only off the ground, but with two incredibly exciting and interesting books that our entire house are quite excited about. We already have more in production, more in our pipeline. Earlier today, I got a wonderful positive reader's report from a peer reviewer for a new project. More about that later, series editors. But it's just very exciting to see so much fresh, interesting, exciting work coming to print in such a short amount of time. So I can't thank you enough for your partnership with us and your support. And I hope that this is just the beginning of creating a very exciting literature together.
Well said. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much, Consul General Madden. Loretta, how do I follow you in terms of celebration? And Clara, it's just been fantastic to work with you. And, you know, we've joked a little bit, you know, sometimes you can have a great idea for a series and it leads to one book or two. We have 3 this year, and we have 3, 4 in the pipeline. This is just, it really is a dream come true, I think, for it's been a great partnership. Thank you also to Hazia, not just the usual set of thank yous for directing the house the year before I came and chairing the search. Also, specifically on the series, Hazia and I talked about this, and Hazia thought it was a good idea. And if it was a good idea in Hazia's mind, it was a good idea in mine. And she gave me some really good advice on how to make this happen. So this is a great day of celebration for us. We do 3 main things in Ireland House. We teach, we do very extensive public programming, and we publish. Those 3 things are interconnected. In fact, in the fall, both of these books that we're introducing today will have their own launch, and every book in the series will have a public program. You can rest assured Francis and Cian will be teaching them too. But in order to teach them or to launch them, we have to publish them. And as people who know me now know that of those 3, they're all important, but publishing has been my big goal since I got here. During my 3 years, I'm finishing 3 years, hard to believe, you know, my big goal was to see if we could do something like this. And today marks the fruition of that goal. It's actually a very personal thing for me as well as an intellectual thing, because I'm a historian of immigration, but I'm also an immigrant. And I live the experience as well as writing about it. I've lived more than half my life in the United States. There are 51 million immigrants in the United States today. Just think about that figure, 51 million immigrants in the United States. That's 1/5 of all the world's immigrants live here in the United States. The US is 5% of the world's population. So, clearly for all our self-criticism, we're doing something right, or the country is doing something right insofar as people want to come here. And I was one of those people, and I came here 30 years ago. At the same time, I moved into a nation of immigrants. I moved into the classic American city of immigrants, but I left the obverse, which was a classic nation of immigrants. The figures, again, are stunning. From 1700 to the present, 10 million men, women, and children left that small island and scattered globally. That's twice the number that live in the Republic today. It's considerably higher than the number that live on the island today. It's higher than the population at its historical peak on the eve of the famine, which was 8.5 million, cut to 4 million by the end of the century. So something extraordinary going on in Ireland, something extraordinary going on in America. My own scholarly work and teaching brings those two worlds together. And the Glucksman Irish Diaspora series exists to bring those two worlds together. The US today is undergoing its third great wave of immigration. There have been three since the foundation of the Republic. The first was during the Irish Famine, the period when Cian McMahon's book is set. The second was the Ellis Island period, the period when Francis Carroll's book is set. The biggest of all is today. Numerically, the biggest wave of immigration is today, the period since 1965, when immigration became genuinely global. So our series, what I love about the partnership is that it's fully peer-reviewed by NYU Press. My job is to take a look at proposals and sample chapters as they come in. Some of them we turn down. This isn't really what we want to do. Others we send over to Clara with a recommendation, but that's all it is. After that, it's out of our hands. It goes out for peer review, and that's the key to the standard of the series we're looking at. We're fortunate in having some wonderful support for this series, because it is, in one sense, a partnership between Ireland House and NYU Press, in that our board of advisors, second to none, has agreed to enter into a partnership to defray some of the costs. And with money we raised through our annual gala, also second to none. I hardly need to say these things after our online gala this year. So we're fortunate in that respect. It's been a nice partnership. We're fortunate also in having a small but excellent interdisciplinary editorial board with Enda Delaney at the University of Edinburgh, Claire Wills at the University of Cambridge, and David Brandage at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Finally, we are fortunate in our authors, Dr. Francis Carroll, Professor Carroll, and Professor McMahon, who will say a few words later in this program. I want to call on Miriam, who works with me as associate editor on every single manuscript that comes through. And I know Miriam will also want to ask Hazia to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin, I feel like a little bit of the, you do all, I feel like you always do the really heavy lifting. Within you're involving me in any small way in terms of how this goes, and it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to see, as you say, not everything that will come across the transom will be suitable for what we're doing, for our objectives for the series as we see it, and more importantly for Clara's and the presses in terms of how this contributes, as Clara said so nicely, to those to complicating or adding sophistication or nuance to our understanding of the themes and topics. I taught my last undergraduate class on Tuesday last, and it just struck me, Kevin, in terms of your point about how tangible the immigrant experience is, especially for us at NYU. I had charged my students with doing an oral history with somebody in their family or somebody in their surroundings, and almost to a student, they were all interviewing parents or grandparents who had come mainly from Asia, a lot of Chinese students. And it was just so powerful to sit back and hear them all, or from India, or for different places in the world, all over, Poland, everywhere, that kind of lived experience of the immigrant that sometimes we feel a little bit distant from because of how we're studying it in a scholarly way, and we're very grounded by our students. So thank you, Kevin. I thank you all the time, but thank you in this forum. I'm so thrilled to see the turnout here today and to have an opportunity in front of all these people to thank you once more. And it is my pleasure. I had a wonderful year working with Hazia as our interim director while the search for Kevin was underway. And Hazia knows the esteem in which I hold her in, and my pleasure to hand over to you today, Hazia. And thank you. We know you're busy and you never decline an invitation when we ask you to do something. Thank you again for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm never too busy for Ireland House. So I'm going to maybe a little bit repeat something, or perhaps come up with a certain repetitive formulation that Kevin offered, but with a twist. So I consider Glucksman Ireland House a kind of example par excellence of the public humanities, and of an institution that blends the academic and the public. And historically, its scope has been teaching and public programs. But there's now a third, shall we say, jewel in your crown, because it's now adding the prestige of having a series. And I say prestige because it is through books that ideas indeed are disseminated into the world. I understand that we're in the age of all kinds of other media and other kinds of ways in which people acquire ideas and information, but I'm still predicting that the book will triumph. Maybe 200 years from now, 1,000 years from now, people will say that's a ridiculous statement, but at least in the immediate future, it is books. And books beget books. And every book, particularly a good book, contains enough in it to inspire somebody to say, I don't agree, or I want to look at it in a different way, or there's another part to the story, and it becomes then a launch pad for more research, more ideas, more knowledge. And living in the world we do now, is there anything more important than knowledge? So I really am so excited to have less than a minor part in this. In as much as when I started at Ireland House, one of the issues, because this came up right away as something that should be done, and I have edited a fairly similar series called the Goldstein Goran series for American Jewish History, which we started. Okay, I was a historian, I'm really fuzzy on dates, but I think it was like 2010, and began very small. And I am now told by people in the field that it is the place to go. And that some of my authors or potential authors say they've been thinking about Oxford, Princeton, Harvard, but they want to come to us because they know that living on the same list, or in a way in sharing a house with the books that came before that, before whatever they're working on, adds to their luster and adds to the way in which people access it. So I am so happy to have, again, just shared a minutia with Miriam about my experiences, and I guess with my series, and I guess I spoke with Kevin a little bit about this, but I take no credit for this at all. I think the two books that have come out just are so, I mean, one I've read already, the other one I'm looking forward to, but the idea that they focus on these two critical parts of immigration ethnic history, and one is the journey. And in the field, we say you cannot disconnect the process of both leaving and arriving without all of the issues involved in that middle part of the process. It's not just push and pull, but it's the what lay between them. So that is crucial. And then the book, and I'm going to pass this on to Frances Carroll, but the book that we're celebrating today touches on that other really crucial part of the history of every immigrant population in the United States, and indeed in other parts of the world, is not only how identities forged in that place they left are kept alive through the political struggles back home, but the way in which immigrants, and in this case, the Irish, are the examples probably at the top of the kind of mountain there, using their political presence in the United States, okay, to navigate for, negotiate for, not necessarily always winning, but trying, and how that fed then into the creation of community life. So that play between foreign policy, political participation, and communal networks. So those are two really crucial parts of the history of immigration and US immigration and ethnic history. And no doubt the volumes that will come out after this will touch on some of the many other crucial issues in American Irish diaspora history, as well as in all those other histories which need to be told. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton, okay, or the torch or the microphone. I guess microphone if we were on Fifth Avenue, to Frances Carroll, who's coming to us now from the University of Manitoba, and obviously the person of the hour. So, Professor Carroll.
Thank you very much. And let me also thank Loretta and Clara Platter and Kevin and Miriam for doing all the work in putting this series together. I think it's going to be a wonderful series, and it's an honor for me to be part of it. I'm very grateful indeed. And I hope my book helps push forward the notion of both the diaspora and the interplay with with, if you like, the host government, the United States government. The diaspora was quite moved, quite touched by the 1916 rebellion and its aftermath, and worked very hard, particularly after the United States entered the war, the First World War in 1917, to try to mobilize the energy of the country to support Ireland in achieving some form of home rule or self-government, if not independence. And the words of Woodrow Wilson that mobilized the United States, mobilized the Irish American community as well in favor of self-determination and the rights of small nations. And while it proved impossible for the peace conference to bring those issues to fruition, in the Irish case, it energized the Irish community in the United States to support the Doyle government from 1919 to 1921, to raise money to help fund the government, and to raise money to bring relief as a result of the destruction caused and the suffering caused by the war for independence. But once the Irish Free State was created, the US government moved, pushed, quite frankly, by the Irish American community, but the American government moved to open diplomatic relations within 2 years of the creation of the Irish Free State, to establish a legation in Dublin in October of 1924. And it's important to note that this was 5 years before any other country opened diplomatic relations with the Irish Free State. So it was clearly a conscious and deliberate effort to step forward and undertake this diplomatic move to welcome the Irish Free State into the international community. The US sent its own diplomat, its own minister in 1927, and within a few months welcomed W.T. Cosgrave to the United States, the first acting head of a government, the first genuine head of an Irish government to the United States. And he was welcomed to Washington to an elaborate luncheon at the White House and a formal dinner hosted by the Secretary of State. He was invited to the House and Senate, then a very rare privilege. And so he was quite warmly accepted as the existing head. Was a very generous and very conspicuous gesture. And that was followed within a matter of months with Secretary of State Kellogg's visit to Dublin that the Consul General mentioned, which was a very real mark of recognition, conspicuous in Kellogg's moment of triumph. He had just come from signing the Kellogg-Briand Peace Pact in Paris and left with President of the Dáil Council, W.T. Cosgrave, on the U.S. destroyer Detroit, or pardon me, U.S. cruiser Detroit, sailing from France to Dunleary, where he was warmly welcomed, given the freedom of the city, taken to the legation, given a dinner by the Governor General and another dinner by the Cosgrave. So it was a major event in the attempt to assert the independence and sovereign status of the Irish Free State. And it is, I think, a wonderful story how Ireland really did become part of the international community through this process of both the efforts of the Irish American diaspora community and the efforts of the government of the United States as well. Ireland was also a member of the League of Nations and the British Commonwealth, which were also important parts of its establishment, but this was the first real international diplomatic effort underway. Anyway, it's a story that I've been quite enamored by and have enjoyed working in, and I'm very grateful to see the book published by NYU Press. I'm quite delighted by that. Now, I'm also delighted to welcome Cian McMahon, who I've known for some years. He was a delightful student of mine longer ago than either of us would want to admit, but I'm delighted that his book will follow mine in this series.
Well done.
Thank you, Carroll, Francis Carroll, for that kind transition. Yeah, no, I was absolutely flabbergasted and really excited when I saw that that the first two books to be published in this series were going to be published by Francis Carroll and I, because Francis had been I'd been a student of Francis's at the University of Manitoba, as he said some years ago, and it seemed to come full circle. So so thank you, Francis, and thanks to everybody. You know, when I was preparing for today's thing, I started making notes on people I had to thank, and I realized that I blew through my 5 to 10 minutes just thanking people. So please excuse me if this opening part's a little brief. I mean, it's obviously Loretta, Kevin, and Miriam Nyan Gray at Glucksman Ireland House, who've done so much to bring this together. It's been wonderful to work with Clara Platter and her staff. That's the first thing. I have to also say thanks to all the people who are here. This is fantastic. Our audience is fantastic. These metropolitan centers represented. We have, looking in the participants, we have people from London, Toronto, Buenos Aires, Milltown, Malby. I mean, all of the major metropolitan centers represented. I think this book series is really, really important for a number of reasons, some of which have gone over. I'm not going to repeat them. I'm going to offer my own idea, which is that, you know, over the last number of years, the history of Irish migration in a transnational, international, global context has been gaining steam and really going well. But it's lacked a scholarly focal point to bring some of that best work together. And so from that perspective, of course, echoing all the other things that have been pointed out, I think that is really important for that. And I'm deeply grateful and humbled, frankly, to be part of it. As Kevin said, that part of his background is in immigration, relates to his own life experiences. I'm the same. I grew up in Dublin. I left as a teenager with my family. I moved to Canada, where I met Francis Carroll. I then went back to Ireland to do a master's at UCD in Dublin, which is where I connected with David W. Miller at Carnegie Mellon. So I've actually emigrated twice, first to Canada and then to the United States. And I'm currently an associate professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm going to very briefly just touch on three kind of goals that I had for this book, and then I'll leave you because I'm sensitive to time here. And the first goal of the book was, I should first say, it's called The Coffin Ship: Life and Death at Sea During the Great Irish Famine. So the first goal that I had was to try and build a new history of migration during the famine, using the voices, words, and ideas of the emigrants themselves. I had noticed that if you look at books on the famine, you'll often see a chapter on migration, but that renders it very difficult for an individual author to spend too much time looking at the individual emigrants' experience themselves, right? Because they're painting the larger narrative of the workhouses, the landlords, the governments, etc. And so it becomes difficult to investigate. So what I tried to do in the book was to flip the model by stripping away the workhouses, the landlords, and the government. Not entirely, of course, they're important dynamics, but to strip them away and to really focus on the words and ideas of the immigrants themselves. And in so doing, to prod, to investigate, to needle, to challenge the idea that the term coffin ships is an accurate representation of the immigrant experience. I'll give you one very brief example. So the chapter 4 is called Death, and it obviously looks at immigrant mortality. I do look at the statistics, you know, in the first section, and I learned that, you know, mortality rates changed over the years. That's not terribly surprising. What was surprising for me was the degree to which death was more than just a threat of life, that death and by extension health and life were a talking point, a conversational point, a dynamic that drew people together. So if you read the letters and diaries of immigrants, you realize that there's more to immigrant mortality than merely how many people died on a given voyage. You learn a lot by looking at how people talked about burials, how people talked about religious rites being changed to fit life at sea. So that's one thing that I wanted to do. That was the first goal, was to use the voices of the immigrants themselves. The second goal was to bring maritime social history to Irish studies. I did my PhD at Carnegie Mellon, which is across the road from the University of Pittsburgh. And I met a lot of people, in particular Marcus Rediker, who's done fantastic work on the social histories of pirates, sailors, the slave trade. When I went back to my immigration literature, I realized that that immigrants were strangely missing from these wonderful maritime social histories. So I was interested in the degree to which the sea voyage was actually a dynamic in migration history that's been overlooked by previous historians. Again, I'll give you one very, very brief example. So immigrants are responsible for, were responsible for cooking and eating together, cleaning up together on the ship. And they often organized themselves into what were called messes, which were small circles of, say, 8 to 10 people who would cook together, clean together, etc. These messes were not merely as a mode of running the ship more easily. They were also designed to bring people together. I have a quote here from I have a quote from a emigrant guide, which said that that the goal of these messes was that friends and relatives may unite and aid each other in their common emigration, and to induce a social intimacy among strangers. So now we think about those weeks at sea, not as this cold, brutal thing that has to be experienced, but actually as a moment in which emigrants, EM, become immigrants, IMM. And so I'm interested in that in between. This book, I should say, is an essay in discovering that. There's so much work to be done. It's ridiculous. The third and final goal I'm going to touch on very briefly is I really wanted to try and compare, contrast, and connect the Irish at home and abroad in the mid-19th century, and especially during the famine. And in this, I am, as with anybody who does this kind of work since in the last 20 years, deeply indebted to Professor Kevin Kenny. Kevin has read most of the things I've written. He's offered multiple comments and suggestions and helpful pointers. But he wrote an article in 2003 in the Journal of American History, which continues to reverberate and is continuously cited to this day in almost all the work, in this kind of work. And in it, Kevin cleverly, he looked at the different ways in which historians organize their work on migration. And he cleverly characterized them into two camps, which is the transnational, which looks for connections between countries, and then the comparative, which looks at a group, say Liverpool and a group in Philadelphia, and then looks for differences and similarities between them. Then Kevin said, you know, if we really want to write great history, we have to do both. We have to both compare and contrast on different sides of the ocean, and we need to connect. Well, I started my PhD in 2003, and I was deeply moved by this article. And I have, you see the original copy, I have it grimy, the corners are all rubbed off, it's underlined so many times, it doesn't mean anything anymore. But it really helped me think about ways in which we can do international global history, not just migration history, but that idea of trying to compare, contrast, and connect. So I tried to do that by looking at how immigrants, their friends and relatives, both comparing and contrasting how they raise the funds to get someone enough money to travel, but also connecting by looking at newspapers, letters, advice scribbled on the back of prepaid tickets, those kinds of connections. And in so doing, I hope that this book recognizes and commemorates obviously the terrible suffering that many immigrants went through. But I also, ironically, in a book called The Coffin Ship, hope that I hope that it robustly celebrates these immigrants' lust for life. So thanks very much. It's an honor to be here.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Cian. You and Francis have really wonderful examples of scholars and scholarship that we can look forward to in delving into both of your books. Please, folks, don't be shy in terms of going to the NYU press site and picking up a copy. They're very readable, well-researched, wonderful contributions to the historiography. and we're just delighted, and we look forward to, they've had shortened time slots today, but in the fall we'll have longer sessions with both of them, whether they like it or not. So please come back and hear more about their both very exciting research in different ways. We've about
Miriam,
9 minutes.
can I make a suggestion as well? So the program ends formally at 1:30. I don't mind staying on a little bit later if beyond that, and some people may need to leave. That's fine too. It's informal. Going to make a suggestion that only the editor of a series could make. If we have over 100 people here, and if people on chat have any ideas for what they think would be a good book in an Irish diaspora series, I would love to hear them. And so if you know, put them in chat if you're so inclined. I've got a few ideas myself. We've got plenty of proposals, but I'd love to know what our audience today would think would be the kinds of projects that would interest them. So back to you, Miriam. In terms of, are you inviting questions now from the audience? How are you going to do that?
Yeah, no, if anyone either in the audience there, I'm watching chat, we're getting a lot of congratulatory notes and not very many questions or anything. Is there anything that any of the panelists want to contribute in terms of any remarks or observations based on what we've covered? Not to put you on the spot.
There's
Loretta.
This is totally personal and very, very bratty child of me. But Cian, in the background, is that etching of Cove in County Cork? The one in back of you, which I assumed is a frontispiece in your book or something.
Yeah, this is a, I'll move to this side so I cover the horse's arse. You can see that there's a, yeah, this is from the Illustrated London News, and it's one of the engravings that they did on emigration. You know, so it predates photography. The famine predates photography by not many years. And so we have to rely on these kinds of images. And I believe this one is of Cove. This is of emigrants preparing to leave. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry, just to say that I reprint a handful of these Illustrated London News images in the book. Yeah.
Wow, I can't wait to get my hands on it. That's where my Brennan people left from Cove.
Wow.
Very evocative for me. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you.
Cian, don't you have a copy there? Why aren't you showing it to us?
A copy of the book? I just got it in the post yesterday, but I'm afraid it might not show up with the background, Clara. There we
It
go.
does.
Oh, it does if I hold it just perfectly. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, it is incredibly exciting to hold this beautiful thing. And I have to say to anybody who is publishing world, writing, thinking, I can't say enough about working with NYU Press in terms of professionalism, quick, the turnaround, the clear communication, the hard work. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Clara. And it's great to see you in person.
Here, here. Here, here.
I see two ideas in chat. One is examining leadership, paths to leadership among Irish immigrants. That could be anything from municipal politics to business. There's all sorts of ways one could approach that. And I see an idea also on Irish language, and they're flying in now. Irish language and music, I believe, though I've lost it. So I'm still reading chat. Anyway, there's another.
Is there, Kevin, is there any way we can collate these that are coming in on chat and just send them out sort of as an addendum to all our participants today? Because I've read
definitely.
I've read a few of them, and they're very, Well, first of all, they're nice because they're happy and congratulatory, but there's some really good ideas coming in.
Yeah, I think one of the neglected fields in my area of American history has actually been business history. There is a field of business history, of course, but it often doesn't intersect with other kinds of social and political history people are doing. There's all sorts of opportunities. But Clara, you're the judge of what's a good book. So.
No, the suggestions look fascinating. Thank you for asking that question. I'll have to read it when I can pay more attention.
Of course, yeah. It's hard to keep on track with that.
And can we just, Kevin, just so people know, we're celebrating the launch today, and of course we have Francis and Cian here, but if you go to the website, the details of the third book are up for December of this year. Niall Wheelahan, happily a former colleague of mine at the European University Institute, Niall's book, it's called Changing Lands, I believe is the title, Clara. And that'll be out in December. So as Kevin mentioned, there are 3 books out this calendar year. So he's really gotten us off with Clara to an amazing start in terms of inaugurating the series.
Yeah, we sincerely hope not to keep up this pace.
Well, stop asking for suggestions.
Doesn't mean we'll act on them. I would be perfectly happy with one really high quality book a year.
You can't help yourself, Kevin. You always will.
Quality counts.
Well, on that happy note, and maybe to push against some of the stereotypes of the Irish running over on time and things like that, we're just on the we're slightly shy of the hour. But thank you. Our Consul General is here. He's just off camera. Thank you to Goran. Thank you, Loretta. Of course, our 2 authors, Cian and Francis, and Hazia and Clara. It's wonderful to have you here with us today. And of course, Kevin, who spearheaded this initiative since he arrived. And we honestly look forward to celebrating this in person, but it's wonderful that we were on the virtual platform today. To get this reach. As Cian said, if Milltown Malbay is in the house, we're doing okay. So congratulations to our authors, and stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
God bless, Miriam. Thank you.
Thanks, Loretta. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you for including me. Always an honor.
Thank you all.
Hazia.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, thanks everyone.